Hello, welcome back. In the previous chapter, you would have gotten an idea about how to use operators, special operators, and so understood the operator precedence. In this chapter, we will understand the concepts of Java expressions. So, what are Java expressions? And also different statements that are there, like we have control statements in Java, which are basically used for controlling and skipping and jumping the line of execution. So that's something what we will see. So where we have three categories, like we have selection statements, iteration statements, and jump statements. So we'll have an overview of these statements in this particular chapter. We had a sneak overview of what expression is all about in the previous chapters. So now let us discuss about the definition of an expression. So what is an expression in general? So if you look at it, an expression is nothing but a combination of A, variables, B, operators, and C, method invocations. So these are the three things that would come inside an expression, and an expression finally results in one single value. Say if A is equal to B plus C plus D, B plus C plus D could be a combination of variables. Okay, so three variables. Or I could say B plus C plus D plus 20. So 20 is just a constant, all right, some value. And then it could also introduce that method invocation. So B plus C plus some result of a method, right? So A dot gets salary, something like that. So this is a simple example of what is the combination that we can bring, which will result in a single value. And of course, evaluated from left to right. So first the rightmost left, and then the next would come into picture. All right, so this is the way in which it gets executed here. So let's take an example of this execution. So we have x, all right, so we have x is equal to 7 and y is equal to 4 and z is equal to 9, and the result is where x plus y star z, and then greater than 50, then x plus y or y plus z. So this is what the ternary operator looks like. So this is ternary operator, which we also discussed in the previous chapters. So now we see here it gets executed and evaluated from left to right, which means first this x plus y star z or into z, it gets executed, and then if it is greater than 50, then you have the next getting executed, something like this. So this is the simple mechanism, and of course you can group the variables as well inside the expression with parentheses, which we already saw, and that decides the precedence of the operators. So this is very much important. Now this is evaluated from left to right. So next let us discuss about the different types of expression, that result that would come into picture. So there is something called as an arithmetic expression. Arithmetic expression basically results in an arithmetic element, something like an integer, or it could result in float, double, etc. Next, we do have relational expression. So relation, as we already have discussed, the relational expression which gives me the relation whether it's greater than or less than something. And then logical and or logical or comes into picture. Then assignment, so A is equal to B, so that's an expression. And then we have conditional expressions coming into picture with the ternary operator, and then finally instance of expression. So all the different types which we already have discussed will come into picture. Next, with this expression being the fundamental element, let us discuss about the next element, which is control statements. So the fundamental element of a programming is a control statement, because we would like to branch certain conditions. Based on some conditions, as part of my computation. It is not the same flow. I would like to switch to a different flow, come back, or I want to split them. There are various different ways of data processing, data computation in a typical logic that we do, and for all these things we have control statements, so which is used for branching the flow of execution or advancing and going to a next step, etc. Right? I don't want to execute lines 20 to 25. Instead, I want to skip this if some condition is not met. A simple example, all right? And then I want to control and state this block of code has to be executed only if some conditions are satisfied, all right? So this is the place where we use the control statements for branching, for making decisions, and looping through the code. So I might do some repetition, and instead of writing the same logic 100 times, if it is containing 100 elements, right, does not make sense for me to write a lengthy program. Instead, I can use a control statement like loop. So this is very much useful. So at the high level, we do have three types of control statements. One is selection statement. Next is looping, which is called as iteration statements. And then finally, to jump from one place to another place, or you want to break the execution, so we do have jump statements. So now let us look at what is a selection statement. It's pretty straightforward. Selection statement allows to control the flow of execution based on some conditions that is evaluated at runtime. A classic example itself is the ternary operator, which we discussed. But ternary is a very primitive way. But if you want to bring multiple conditions, yes, this is the place where selection statement would be helpful. For this purpose, we do have two types of statements used in every programming language. Java is also one among them. So we have if. So if you have worked on C, C++, you would be aware of it. So no big deal. So this is a simple statement like if and switch statement. We'll discuss the details in the coming chapters. Next, we do have iteration statements for creating loops of execution in a program, right? So in this case, you can have the loops created, and you can also nest the loops. So one loop inside another loop. So that's very much possible. And loop, as the name itself says, repeatedly executes a particular block of code until termination. A classic example, let us say I want to compute something like there are 100 employees in my organization. I want to generate the salary statement, a very simple use case, right? A simple problem. So now I don't want to write 100 lines. Let's say for generating one single report, it will require say 10 lines of code. So for 100 employees, how many lines of code is required? It cannot be like 100 times 10. It does not make sense just keeping on repeating that same line of code. So instead, a simple example could be putting that 10 lines of code that is required to create a salary statement of one single employee, for instance, as a block of code, and execute that block of code for all the employees, because finally you need the same statement, right? So that's a simple example of looping a particular block of code. And then there are different iterative statements as well here. And of course, loops can be empty as well. So loop block of code can be empty, and there are certain special cases where we use. I will discuss about those specific use cases later. What are the different types? We do have a statement like while statement, do while, for, and for each. So these are the different iteration statements that we basically have in Java. In addition to this, we do have jump statements, which will transfer the control of the program from one part of the code to another part of the code with some specific requirements. So helps to change the flow of execution. So as and when required, you want to do some changes, yes, you can control this flow. And there are three types of statements. One is break, as the name itself says. I want to break this particular flow of execution and come back to the previous execution cycle, something like that. then we do have continue, then finally we do have a return. So every method typically can have a return statement saying that you are returning from this particular method. So this is a simple example of the jump statements that are supported and available in Java. So we will just take a look at all these things in the coming chapters. So in the next chapter, we will focus on understanding if statement. So stay tuned.